NSW. Parents of Reddit. What phases did your child go through that was awkward for you? My younger sister was known to say ni hao to literally any Asian person she'd walk by when the show Ni Hao Kailan was a thing. I'm a white American that just got back from a vacation to China. Plenty of total strangers went out of their way to shout or come over and say hello with a huge smile. Finally they had a chance to use the word and it was so exciting. Like just passing on the escalator. Hello. My son went through a phase when he pretended he was his own imaginary friend. He followed himself everywhere. Sometimes they fought. He lost himself in a store one day and ran up and down the aisles screaming his own name. My son was a strange kid. He lost himself in a store. Deep. My mom once told me I went through a breaking glass and light bulbs and placing them and kitchen knives under my bed phase. My little brother went through the lovely phase where he just tried to touch everyone's genitals all the time. His siblings, parents, friends, relatives. God, it was so painful. I mean literally. He wasn't a gentle little toddler. I call it the aggressively enthusiastic genital poking phase. That sounds horribly annoying but also hilarious. My daughter always points and laughs at bald people. She is 5 and has been doing it for 3 years now. So not really a phase. We've gone over so many times how it's impolite and hurts feelings, but to her a bald person is like the most amazing thing. That she has to scream out to the world that this guy is bald. Just be glad God didn't decide to punish her by having a bear eat her. I'm a nanny and the 2-year-old I watch just met the Easter Bunny for the first time this year. Now, without warning, in the middle of conversations he will look behind me and say Easter Bunny going to get you every time I'm afraid to turn around. That is creepy as frick. When my younger brother was a toddler, my parents would wheel his pushchair around department stores where he'd greet random women with the phrase nice lady. My parents said he had remarkably good taste in women for someone his age. My daughter was the opposite. She would say, "SOOOO pretty to remarkably ugly women," and then she would pat their hair. It was so embarrassing. She grew up to be incredibly sarcastic, but I hate to think she was practicing sarcasm when she was a toddler. I don't know if you've seen Milo and Otis, but there's a fairly graphic scene where they show a cat and a dog giving birth. My brother didn't remember this scene and watched the movie recently with his 4-year-old. No matter how many times they've explained the scene to her, she insists on telling everyone that dogs and cats eat babies, poop them out, and then lick off the poop. And I mean everyone. Family, friends, her doctor, cashiers. I think she might have been scarred. The one where my 2-year-old child said damn it a lot because I said it in front of him once. Debit was how it sounded when he did it. This lasted a good month. Debit, that must have been annoying. I'm the child here, but I'm sure this made my dad very awkward and uncomfortable. I don't know how much you guys remember about the Fairly Odd Parents, but there was one character who always said, "Do you think I'm sexy, me being 8?" I had no idea what that really meant, so I would constantly go up to my dad and say, "Do you think I'm sexy?" in the funny tone the character would speak it in. God, I cringe so much thinking about that. Telling everyone everything, including standing up at school and saying mommy and daddy had a fight and he gave her a concussion. In the most technical sense, it was true but not the stuff of cops. My son is 4 and he has been in the infatuated by his junk stage. I try to approach the situation delicately because he shouldn't be ashamed of his body, so I don't want to be like that's bad. But it's difficult because he'll be like, "Mommy look. I'm still infatuated with my junk." I'm going to answer for my sister since she doesn't know about Reddit. When my niece started talking, we were all amazed at how loud and shrill her voice was, until she learned the word clock, and she would shout dong in public. When my son says Bridget sounds like bee, look at that bee, we live off the coast and drive over many bee. My 3-year-old son went through a phase where he insisted on wearing hearing protector earmuffs all day long and refused to answer to any name other than Spasserboy number 3. Sister here, but awkward for the whole family. My little brother never did it at my mother's house, but whenever we were at my dad's, whenever he went to the bathroom he would stay there screaming at the top of his lungs, "Dad, come wipe my bum," from the ages of 4-8. He knew how to do it but he just wouldn't leave the bathroom unless dad went up. and dad tried leaving him there and not answering many times, but he just sat in there for hours. I had one phase that was probably really embarrassed for my parents. This phase was about when I was 5 and is simply known as the refusal to crap phase. I'm not sure how the refusal to crap phase came to be, but I refused to take a crap. This resulted in an ungodly amount of constipation that my mom had to send me to the doctor for. In order to get me to crap, she would let me run around naked in our backyard and just hope one popped out. This phase went on for so long that my mom would make me tell her that I took a crap. I remember one time going up to my mom in a crowded restaurant and saying, "Mommy, I pooped. Do you want to see?" I was a strange child. Not a parent, but when I was a little kid I really wanted fish and a fish tank. So I pretended to feed my imaginary carpet creatures by shaking my water bottle and dripping it onto the floor. Needless to say, despite the floor being very well taken care of and watered on a nightly basis, my parents didn't take so kindly to it and finally gave in and bought me some actual fish. My own kid is 17 now, and I'd have to say her emo phase when she was about 12. Not my kid, but my 3-year-old niece really likes clothes. If you take her in a store with you, you're risking her saying, in a loud 3-year-old voice, "Oh, I do not like that lady's shirt, dress, shoes. It's ugly." On the plus side, she often compliments people's clothes, but you just never know when a simple trip to get apple juice is going to end with offending some innocent bystander in the store. When I was a young boy I was fascinated with knives and swords and stuff, and my mom would never let me have any. No pocket knives or anything. And one day I found a thing full of knives, and I took them all and hid them in my room. I think she thought I wanted to kill someone. The fact that I duct taped one to the end of a baseball bat to make a spear didn't help anything either. Not a parent, but my little brother went through some phases that were awkward for everyone. These included needing to be fully naked with the door open to take a crap, refusing to learn how to wipe, but the funniest was his tucking clothes into his butt phase. We'd go to the beach and he'd tuck the back of his swimmers between his cheeks so it looked like he was wearing a G-string. He'd have a football game and he'd pull his pants up as high as they go and tuck them into his butt and play the game like that. Even just regular shorts, he'd attempt to give himself a nice deep wedgie. He doesn't remember ever doing this, but the shame and embarrassment will never leave the rest of my family. Probably wore his shorts like that cause his butt was all it achieved from not wiping properly. I went through a phase where I talked like a baby and hissed at things. I was 8. I am pretty sure that must have been awkward for them. Whittle and ears Wade. My sister went through a phase where she kept constantly breaking bones and getting bruised and falling off of play equipment, and I'm fairly sure the emergency room staff, who we eventually got to know quite well when I went through my own hospitalization phase, thought my parents had a hand in it. She was just a really adventurous kid. Haha, I broke so many bones as a child that my parents were accused of child abuse by the nurses in the ED. Turned out I have a brittle bone disease. Not my kid, but a young relative of mine, is in the phase of dressing like a bum, playing his guitar on the street, and jumping on freight trains. Some kind of hipster nomad thing, I guess. Not a phase, but something very embarrassing for my parents. Growing up in a town of less than 5,000 people, with a father who was a prominent public figure in the community, anything that happened in school usually got back to him. We were learning how to type in computer class and were instructed to type something about our families. My dad has done Copenhagen for as long as I can remember. When I asked about it as a kid, they would always tell me it was drugs and to never ever do it. So for that particular assignment, I typed my dad does drugs over and over and over. Pretty sure they hung it up in the hall. My cousins used to call our grandfather Pimpor, which was fine, until they started shortening it. Nothing more embarrassing than meeting them at the airport and having them grate him with "Yo pimp" from across the terminal. I went through a phase where I liked to sniff people's seats as soon as they got up. I was under 5 years old. At 10, I refused to bathe or wear deodorant. I had an elaborate plan to trick my mom into thinking I showered, and it would have been easier to actually shower. The angry teenager phase. My oldest has been going through it for a while. He doesn't have an anger issue, he just gets annoyed easily and stays angry. Unfortunately, he learned it from his dad. Are you his dad? Because you seem like an angry Manx. When my son turned 4 he suddenly became fascinated with women's legs. He would tell them I like your legs. I really like your legs. He would do this to strangers in public, loudly. He's 6 now and has become a bit more discreet. Now he just nudges me and says, "Dad, look at her legs." Little perv. I love him. My brother went through a boob obsession stage at age 4. He even asked my grandma one time, "Grandma, can I see you's boobies?" When I was a kid I would somersault around our 1-story house. Even where there was tile. Somersaulted over that like a pro. My parents were concerned. I saw it as fun. That is kind of awesome. Child here. In 8th grade I went through a phase where I wanted to be Jewish. I checked out hundreds of books on Judaism from our library and talked a lot with our Jewish neighbors. I was incredibly serious about converting and being Jewish. I'm in my 20s now and it's still a running joke with my friends back home. "Remember that one time you wanted to be Jewish?" My parents aren't exactly religious themselves, so I'm sure they thought WTF is this girl doing, but they were supportive of me. The phase ended shortly after I started the 9th grade. Short-lived. I also wanted to be Jewish as a kid, but only because during the holidays the Jewish kids got to make blue and gold holiday crafts and the Christian kids had to make green and red ones. Blue was my favorite color, so I got really jealous and tried to convince my parents that my teddy bear was Jewish, so we all had to convert. My son just turned 3 years old last month and has started this phase where he has to get my wife's attention in public places and declare to her loudly that his pee-pee is big now. He won't tell me, but he makes dang sure my wife knows. She hates, but I can't help but laugh. That's hilarious. Tell him stories of this when he is old enough to understand, then let him know pee-pee is big now to mess with him. He's 6, mildly autistic, and his filter is non-existent, so my son will point out things about people that he finds interesting, like having a weave, missing limbs, or being so fat you need a scooter. In his mind, these people are awesome because they are different. I have to explain to him that missing an arm isn't fun, that guy's life is really hard, and he shouldn't point out how people look. It's not polite. God dang. Off topic, but my heart still hurts remembering explaining the guy missing his arm, and his guileless face just sinking as he thought about that dude and how he might have hurt his feelings. Frick. If it gives you any comfort, I'm an amputee, and I love it when kids are baffled and can't stop looking. It's only natural to be curious. The most fun are the parents who tries to hide their children's reactions. I usually respond by twisting my leg 360 degrees, which makes most children drop their jaw. My 2-year-old went through a painting with poop phase that lasted 4 months. We had to safety pin his on his clothes if we had to leave him alone for more than a minute. He waited till we were out of the room and bam, covered everything he could reach in poop. Oh, and I'm pregnant. When this phase started I had the worst morning sickness and nausea and bad smells triggered me. I think he finally passed that stage though. Whatever you do, don't show him the Lion King anywhere remotely close to when your baby is born. Just think, Simba, but not with fruit. I'm not a parent, but when I was smaller I couldn't pronounce my C's. Any word that started with the letter C was replaced with a T. So naturally I spot a cat out in the backyard and proceed to ask my dad if he likes titties. He chuckles and responds with, "Yes son, I do like titties." Not a phase, but just one incident. I watched a lot of stand-up comedy and at 16, I was getting into some of the edgier, kinda racist comics. I thought it would be a good idea to try out my own brand of this humor at the Christmas dinner table. I made a pretty racially insensitive comment to my aunt about the fact that some of her students are African American. Needless to say, nobody found it funny, and while my parents said nothing, I basically realized that I was being a colossal freaking jackass. I am pretty sure they don't remember that, or at least I hope they don't. But I certainly do. I have forgiven myself for the stupid things I did when I was young, but at the time of this incident, I was an otherwise mostly mature young adult. My son, aged 4, wanted to know what a certain bit of his body was called, so I explained about testicles. I'm the mum. His dad was deployed at the time. My son was so delighted with this new bit of knowledge that he made up a testicle song and sang it loudly all the time, everywhere. For those who want to sing along at home, it bore quite some resemblance to Bicycle Race by Queen. Testicle, testicle. My daughters both colored their hair random colors and my oldest went through a facial piercing stage. But I figured if that was the worst they were doing I wasn't gonna pitch a fit. Both had excellent grades. My oldest graduated high school with a 3.8 GPA and went straight to college. Sadly she and her boyfriend were both killed by a drunk driver 10 months ago. My youngest is still trying to bounce back from losing her best friend. Sadly she hasn't dyed her hair anymore. This, my friends, is why I explicitly adopt the choose your battles method of parenting. Your child's hair will grow out, pissings heal, phases come and go, but at the end of it all, you still have a child to hold tight. You did it right, OP. Unlike your child's hair, your love and memories will never fade. I went to Catholic school growing up. For some reason I got really interested in crucifixion, so I would steal nails and a hammer from my garage and crucify all my toys onto my fence and random trees. I was a crazy little kid. Every time the house phone rang I would pick it up and say Wallace and Gromit's window cleaning service. May we be of assistance? My 7-year-old son is now in the boobs are fascinating phase. He wants to go around asking women if he can touch their boobs to see if they're like the other ones he's touched. Touching the boobs on the mannequins, yelling at the top of his lungs. In the store, "Dad, check these ones out. They're hard and pointy." Seems very scientific. To be honest, I've been in that phase going on 32 years now. It never ends. Not a parent, but as a small child I would do headstands on railings all the time. My mom figured out that if she let me do them I would get bored and come down eventually, but if she tried to stop me I would get startled and fall. I'm pretty sure that I dropped myself on my head as a child. When I was like 7 my mom had these 2 friends that were a lesbian couple and they shared a house and stuff, and I didn't know what lesbian meant and I thought that it was just being grown up and sharing a house with your best friend, and I thought, that is the coolest thing ever. So I told my mom that me and my best friend were lesbians and she was chill with it. But I would tell every adult that mom stopped to chat with. When she would be like, "This is my daughter and her friend," I'd be like, "We're lesbians." I soon discovered what lesbians actually meant, and although I turned out to be heterosexual, I'm very glad about how wonderful and accepting my mother was of my 7-year-old lesbian phase. Currently watching my dad suffer through my brother's brony phase. He's young, but not that young. He's a sweet kid, but there's a whole lot of cringe going on at my dad's house these days. His other hobbies are pretty masculine. Competition shooting, learning to work on his car, etc. But the family is having a hard time wrapping our heads around this brony thing. Even his younger sister, who is the appropriate age to love MLP, thinks it's weird. I just don't want him to get picked on. It might not be a phase, but good luck to all of you. I went through an awkward phase when I was like 2 where I would grab our golden retriever's balls. I had no idea until my parents showed me photos recently. I got over my grabbing balls phase pretty quickly, but my dad apparently decided it seemed like a good idea. He's getting married to my new stepdad next week. My 5-year-old, who used to eat any and everything in sight, suddenly won't eat anything. She hates red meat. If it has a spot on it, oh dear god, the world has ended. Oh, and if she doesn't like it or doesn't want to eat, she tells everyone who will listen, "I didn't eat today." She'll eat like half a Pop-Tart for breakfast. I pack her lunch for school and she comes home with the entire lunch minus her orange. We'll sit at the dinner table for an hour waiting on her to eat and she's just like, "I'm not hungry, the doctor says she's healthy and she'll eat when she's hungry." If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.